If you remember, Joseph had been sold into slavery by his brothers. They originally wanted to kill him. Reuben didn't want him to die. Reuben says, let's put him in this hole, and his plan was to come back later and to take him out of the hole and to save him. I'm not entirely sure the extent of Reuben's plans, but he didn't want Joseph to die. So while Reuben is away and the rest of the brothers are having a picnic by the hole, they see some Midianites and some, I believe it's Midianites and some Egyptians or something like that. They see some traders, some slavers, and they sell Joseph as a slave. 20 pieces of silver, the price of a slave. All right, so Joseph now has been sold into slavery. Genesis chapter 39. Now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites who brought him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of the Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him, and he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he made him an overseer of his house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had, in the house and the field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food that he ate. Keep this in mind, because this is going to be a pattern that Joseph has later on, after he goes to prison, after he rises in ranks, that God is blessing basically everything that Joseph is putting his hand to. Now, Joseph was sold into slavery. Joseph was unjustly attacked by his brothers. He was horribly treated by his brothers. And yet, even though he's sold into slavery, it doesn't say, and then he drags his feet and he tried to sabotage everything that his master did, and he tried to destroy his master's house. Even though he was put in a position in an unjust way, he still did everything to the best of his ability to the glory of God. Martin Luther talks about this, and other theologians talk about this as well. In fact, St. Paul talks about this. We don't do Philemon today. In the letter to Philemon, Paul is writing about a runaway slave named Onesimus. Onesimus is run away. It's a really short letter. Highly recommended. It's a very sweet letter. Onesimus was a slave. He ran away from Philemon, and he ran to Paul to try to get his freedom. Now, Paul says, I could, by my own authority, say, you are to treat this guy as a free man. But I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to ask you as a brother in Christ, out of love, that you treat him, you receive him back, not as a slave, but as a brother instead of a slave. The letter is all that we have of that story within the Bible. But the idea is that Onesimus, the slave, worked hard and was a blessing for Paul and would be a blessing for Philemon as well. So even though he was in slavery, which isn't necessarily something that God wanted, like Joseph being in slavery was an unjust thing, Joseph still worked to the best of his ability and still glorified God in all he did. In the case of Onesimus also glorified God in what he did when he went back to Philemon. Now, some history has it, some church tradition has it, that Onesimus then went on to become a bishop. So imagine this, somebody who was once considered a slave is then considered not just a brother in Christ and a free man, but also a bishop in the church. So overcoming these sorts of limitations that the world put on them. Okay, all that just to say that God blesses Joseph where he's working and in whatever situation he's in. So even if somebody is in an unjust situation, let's say they're a prisoner of war, let's say they're captured, they're enslaved, there's something bad has happened to them, or they're just a prisoner, for any sake, you can still act like a Christian even when you're in prison, even when you're enslaved. All right. Now Joseph, okay, so we're on the middle half of verse 6, a new paragraph in this Bible. Now Joseph was a handsome man, in form and appearance, and after a time his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, lie with me. But he refused, and the interesting thing is how screwed up this entire family history is. It's shocking that Joseph does the right thing here. Good for him. But he refused. He said to his master's wife, behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept anything back from me except yourself, because you are his wife. How then could I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie beside her, or to be with her. Good for him. So he, unlike Judah and Tamar, unlike a bunch of these other people in his family, he says, no, to sin with you is to sin against God. How can I obey God while doing these wicked things? Verse 11. But one day when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men was there in the house, she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. But he left his garment in her hands and fled and got out of the house. And as soon as she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and fled out of the house, she called to the men of the household, saying to them, See, he has brought among us a Hebrew to laugh at us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And as soon as he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried out, he left his garment beside me and fled and got out of the house. Then she laid up his garment by her until his master came home, and she told him the same story. The Hebrew servant whom you have brought among us came in to me to laugh at me. But as soon as I lifted up my voice and cried out, he left his garment beside me and fled out of the house. So once again, Joseph's garment is a problem. Different garment, but I don't know. Maybe that's an interesting pattern. Maybe it's just a coincidence. But he doesn't do anything wrong in this case, and she lies about him, and unfortunately there's no witnesses there to back him up, so what is the husband to do except to take her word for it? Verse 19, as soon as his master heard the words that his wife spoke to him, this is the way your servant treated me, his anger was kindled, and Joseph's master took him and put him in the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph. That's another pattern. The Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper in prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were there in prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it successful. All right, so first, enslavement. He's enslaved, and he glorifies God even in his slavery, and God is with him in his slavery. Second, he's in prison, again, unjustly, and God glorifies everything that he does and is with him even in prison. Chapter 20. Sometime after this, the cupbearer of the king of Egypt and the baker committed an offense against their lord, the king of Egypt. And the Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and he put them in the custody of the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard appointed Joseph to be with them, and he attended them. They continued for some time in custody. So again, Joseph is taking care of all the prisoners in the prison, specifically the king's cupbearer and the king's baker. I guess were high enough positions that they got special treatment. They got put in the nicer prison. And Joseph is in charge of them, or Joseph is taking care of them, rather. Verse 5, and one night they both dreamed, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, each of his dreams, and each dream with its own interpretation. When Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw that they were troubled. So he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in the custody of his master's house, why are your faces downcast today? They said to him, we have had dreams, and there is no one to interpret them. And Joseph said to them, do not interpretations belong to God? Please tell them to me. Remember, again, Joseph, the one who had dreams before, also understood the interpretation of the dreams. This is specifically because God is giving him this information, not because Joseph is just particularly clever on his own, or that any Christian can just say, oh, tell me your dream, I'll give you an interpretation of that. Joseph had a specific calling for this. So the chief cupbearer told his dream to Joseph and said to him, in my dream there was a vine before me, and on the vine there were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, the blossoms shot forth, and the clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. Then Joseph said to him, this is its interpretation. The 3 branches are the 3 days. In 3 days Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office, and you shall place Pharaoh's cup in his hand as formerly when you were his cupbearer. Only remember me when it is well with you, and please do me the kindness to mention me to Pharaoh, and so get me out of this house. For I was indeed stolen out of the land of the Hebrews, and here I have also done nothing that they should put me into this pit. When the chief baker saw the interpretation was favorable, he said to Joseph, I also have a dream. There were three cake baskets on my head, and in the uppermost basket were all sorts of baked food for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating it out of the basket on my head. And Joseph answered it and said, this is the interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from you and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat the flesh from you. On the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, he made a feast for all the servants and lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among the servants. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to him. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Okay, so this is obviously gonna come up later. It's it's interesting that the phrase is used, the Pharaoh will lift up your head in 2 different cases. In one case, obviously, it's blessing. In the other case, yeah, your head's literally going to be lifted up in a noose, and you're going to be hanged. But it's a fun play on words, but it's an interesting contrast here. Again, this is actually a great. I love this for. I mean, we've got like a children's Bible that's got pictures and the simplified version of Bible stories and stuff. And if kids are able to understand this, I mean, they can absolutely appreciate this. It's not to say that it's not true, but the Bible definitely has some fun stories. And it's like, that was clever. Lifting his head up and lifting the other guy's head up. I get it. All right, are there any questions or comments before I keep going? Yes, sir.
Is it curious that I think it's Potiphar saw Joseph as being blessed, but we see him being afflicted?
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Because, so Potiphar saw Joseph as being blessed, yet we see Joseph as being afflicted. See, Joseph was sold into slavery, he was thrown in the pit, he was put into prison. All of these negative things happened to him. He was put in Egypt. Egypt isn't his land. It's not the land of his fathers or anything like that. He's in a foreign land. Everything about his situation seems like it's a negative thing. But yeah, I think that's a good point, that Potiphar sees, and the jailer in this case, see that Joseph is actually blessed by God. Not because he's a slave and not because he's in prison, but because God is with him. And we can think about this as well, I suppose, if we want to think about suffering that we go through. That are we blessed by God because we're in prison? Well, no, we're blessed by God because God is with us. So even in the case of horrible suffering, again, Joseph didn't deserve what happened to him. In the case of Potiphar's wife, in the case of being sold into slavery, he didn't do anything specific to bring that upon himself. But he was still, so it's unjust, but he was still blessed by God, by God's presence. All right. Anything else? Okay. Chapter 41. After 2 whole years, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing by the Nile, and behold, there came up out of the Nile 7 cows, attractive and plump, and they fed in the reed grass, and behold, 7 other cows, ugly and thin, came up out of the Nile after them, and stood by the other cows on the bank of the Nile. And the ugly, thin cows ate up the 7 attractive, plump cows, and Pharaoh awoke. And he fell asleep and dreamed a second time, and behold, 7 ears of grain, a plump and good, were growing on one stalk. And behold, after them sprouted 7 ears, thin and blighted by the east wind. And the thin ears swallowed up the 7 plump, full ears. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. So in the morning his spirit was troubled. And he sent and he called for the magicians of Egypt and all the wise men. Pharaoh told his dream. There was none who could interpret it to Pharaoh. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, so again, this is 2 years later. So 2 years after this cupbearer is supposed to remember Joseph in Egypt, and he's like, oh yeah, there's this guy I was supposed to mention to you. It slipped my mind for 2 years. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, I remember my offenses today, when Pharaoh was angry with his servants and put me and the chief baker in the custody of the house of the captain of the guard. We dreamed on the same night, he and I, each having a dream with its own interpretation. A young Hebrew was there with us, a servant under the captain of the guard. When we told him, he interpreted our dreams to us, giving us an interpretation to each man according to his dream. And as he interpreted to us, so it came about. I was restored to my office, and the baker was hanged. Then Pharaoh sent, so let me see something real quick. Put in the custody of the house, the captain of the guard. It's interesting, yeah, that these guys, I don't know if they realized that Joseph was a prisoner as well, because the captain of the guard had been using Joseph to work. to help him out. I don't know if that's anything. I might just be reading into the text a little bit too much. But he just says, yeah, under the captain of the guard, there's a guy who was there with us. And he was a servant of the captain of the guard. It doesn't say that he was a prisoner. So, all right. Verse 14, then Pharaoh sent and called to Joseph, and they quickly brought him out of the pit. And when he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, he came in before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. And I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Joseph answered Pharaoh, it is not in me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, behold, in my dream, I was standing on the banks of the Nile. 7 cows, plump and attractive, came up out of the Nile and fed on the reed grass. 7 other cows came up after them, poor and very ugly and thin, such as I have never seen in the land of Egypt. And the thin, ugly cows ate up the first 7 plump cows. But when they had eaten them, morning guys, when they had eaten them, no one would have known that they had eaten them, for they were still as ugly as in the beginning. Then I awoke. I also saw in my dream 7 ears growing up on the stalk, full and good. 7 ears, withered and thin, blighted by the east wind, sprouted after them. And the thin ears swallowed up the 7 good ears. And I told it to the magicians, but there was no one who could interpret it to me. Now I'm thinking of a case in, I think it's King Nebuchadnezzar. Later on, he has dreams that he needs interpreted by Daniel. And in that case, he doesn't even tell the people the dreams. He says, somebody has to tell me what my dream was, and then they can tell me the interpretation that I'll believe them. But the interpretation of dreams is a common theme for God's people. It's a common indicator that God is talking to the people. And Joseph explains exactly why. Again, it's not that Joseph, just as a believer, he has the ability to interpret dreams. And it's not that Joseph just is so smart and so clever that he can interpret dreams. But he says that God is going to give you the interpretation. God is going to give you the interpretation of the dreams through me, but it's going to be God giving the interpretation of the dreams. So this is why it's a common sign that God is with somebody when they interpret dreams. Yes, ma'am? That's a good question. Why were dreams so important to be interpreted? And I know a lot of times when we have dreams now, we think, oh, well, what did I eat last night? what has caused this dream? What's been on my mind lately? A lot of times we have things that stress us out. And I think a lot of times dreams just there is no interpretation for every dream. I think in specific cases, God communicates to people through dreams. So, for example, God communicates to Joseph in the New Testament through a dream to go back to Egypt by another route, or go back to Israel by another route. I don't remember if he's going to Egypt or coming back, but he returns by another route, because I think it's going to Egypt because Herod is looking for him. So there are times that God communicates to people through direct kind of one-on-one thing. Remember, Moses is standing for the burning bush and he hears the voice. There's another time when it's the Garden of Eden and Jesus is walking through the garden and he talks to Adam and Eve. There's another time when Moses is on the mountain and he's talking with God on the mountain. But then there's other times where God talks through dreams. Sometimes God regularly talks through prophets. A prophet will say, behold, God has given me this message for you. Thus saith the Lord. And we don't know exactly how God gives them the message. Sometimes it's in a dream, but sometimes, I don't know. However it is, it's always very clear when he gives a prophet. He never says to a prophet, he says, I'm going to lay this on your heart, a vague notion that something will happen. It's always a specific, this will happen, this will happen, this will happen, and then this will happen, so you can test it. So in the case of dreams, I imagine that we live in a world where everything is physical, everything is about biology and physical science, and we can explain bad dreams with bad burritos. But in the case of, you've got Pharaoh and a lot of these ancient cultures, the spiritual world was a reality all around them. Everything that happened, they had a god, or they had some force of nature was connected to some sort of spirit or something like that. So when they had a dream that was particularly troubling, their first thought was not, what did I eat last night, but rather, what does this mean? Maybe one of the gods is trying to communicate something with me. So for Pharaoh, I fully expect, I don't think he's a believer in Yahweh, but I fully expect that he thought, okay, this dream was significant enough, there's something about how I'm feeling about this dream that it must mean something. After all, I am Pharaoh. Pharaoh was often regarded as the highest god, the king of kings and the god of gods. So in all the Egyptian pantheon, and you had the god of the Nile, and you had the god of the harvest, and you had Ra and Amun-Ra and all these others. Pharaoh was at the very top. He was the god over all of the gods. Same like Caesar was god over all of the gods. Pharaoh was god over all the gods. So if God himself has a dream, then it must be very important if he's bothered by this dream. I think he was drinking his own Kool-Aid there. But so when he has this dream, it makes perfect sense that he wants to seek an interpretation. Now, maybe he's had other dreams that don't have an interpretation, and probably the magicians and the other people in his council come up to him and they say things he wants to hear, and that's just what he's used to. Is one of the magicians is going to tell me something. I dreamed of a red balloon floating in the sky, and I was holding an eclair, and the eclair turned into, I don't know, a ferret or something, and it scurried away. Like some weird dream that you have, and the magician says, behold, this means that you are a glorious king, and everyone will bow down to you. And he says, yes, I like that interpretation. You can stay. That's probably what he's used to. What he had here was all the magicians were trying to interpret the dreams, and he didn't believe any of them, which is unique, which is interesting that he had to seek out somebody who could actually interpret dreams. So I imagine probably the interpretation of dreams is a fairly common thing with him. The Pharaoh had another dream last night. Okay, I'm going to think of something good to tell him. But in this case, for whatever reason, it bothered him enough, and none of the magicians convinced him. So he sought the Hebrew, Joseph. Okay, let's see. Okay, he tells him the dream. Genesis chapter 41, verse 25. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are one. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and 7 good ears are 7 years. The dreams are one. The 7 lean and ugly cows that came up after are the 7 years, and the 7 empty ears blighted by the east wind are also 7 years of famine. It is as I told the Pharaoh. God has shown to Pharaoh what he is about to do. There will come 7 years of great plenty throughout the land of Egypt. But after them there will arise 7 years of famine, and all the plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt. The famine will consume the land, and the plenty will be unknown in the land by the reason of the famine that will follow it, for it will be severe. And the doubling of Pharaoh's dreams means that this thing is fixed by God, and God will shortly bring it about. Now, therefore, let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh proceed to appoint overseers over the land, and take 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt during the 7 plentiful years, and let them gather all the food of these good years that are coming, and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh for all the food in the cities, and let them keep it, the food that shall be a reserve for the land against the 7 years of famine that are to occur in the land of Egypt, so that the land may not perish through the famine. So one interesting thing here is that God specifically gives this vision to Pharaoh. He acknowledges he's the one who gave Pharaoh authority in the first place. Remember later on, Jesus would say, you would have no authority if it was not given to you. So even though Pharaoh is not a believer, God still did place him in authority. God gave him any authority he did have. So God sends the dream directly to the king. Again, with King Nebuchadnezzar, the same thing happens. Even though he's a horrible, wicked king, God sends the dream to him because it's going to be his responsibility to take care of Daniel in that case, and in this case, the responsibility is going to be to take care of the Egyptians. So God is caring for even the unbelievers, even the nations of unbelievers. All right, Joseph interprets the dream. So we're in Genesis chapter 41, verse 37. This proposal pleased Pharaoh and all his servants, and Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find a man like this in whom is the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has shown you all this, there is none so discerning and wise as you are. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall order themselves as you command. Only as a regard to the throne will I be greater than you. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set you over the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, and clothed him in garments of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck. So once again, Joseph is getting special garments. And he made him ride in the second chariot, and they called out before him, bow the knee. Thus he set him over the land of Egypt. Moreover, Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without your consent, no one shall lift up hand or foot in all the land of the Egyptians. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphanath-Paneah. And he gave him in marriage to Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. So Joseph went out over the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and Joseph went out of the presence of the Pharaoh and went through all the land of Egypt. During the 7 plentiful years, the earth produced abundantly and gathered up the food for these 7 years, which occurred in the land of Egypt. And they put in the food in the cities. They put in every city the food from the fields around it. And Joseph stored up grain in great abundance, like sand of the sea, until he ceased to measure it, for it could not be measured. Before the year of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph. Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, the priest of On, bore them to him. Joseph called the name of the first Manasseh, for he said, God has made me forget all my hardship and all my father's house. The name of the second he called Ephraim, for God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. The 7 years of plenty that occurred in the land of Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began to come, as Joseph had said. There was famine in all the lands, but in the land of Egypt there was bread. When all the land of Egypt was famished, the people came to Pharaoh for bread. Pharaoh said to the Egyptians, go to Joseph. What he says, you do. So when the famine had spread over all the land, Joseph ordered all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. Moreover, all the earth came to Egypt to Joseph to buy grain, because the famine was so severe over all the earth. So I'm not entirely sure. Egypt was a big country at this point. It was a big nation at this point, but I don't know that it was necessarily as wealthy, as large as we think it was. But this is one of the turning points where Egypt has stored up so much grain, and they're the only people in the area who have food. People are coming and giving them any amount of money that they can to get food, and Egypt becomes exorbitantly wealthy. What's interesting, I was looking at some documentaries. They were going through some of the history and some of the archaeology about these things, and it looks like around the time there's 2 basic timelines of when Joseph and the Israelites were in Egypt. I forget, one's in the Middle Kingdom, one's in the early and Middle Kingdom. They're different. One of them is more popular, but the other one actually lines up with the Bible and archaeology, but the other one is kind of what everybody is sticking with. The King Ramses II is actually the Pharaoh who Moses is interacting with. But anyways, in the archaeology they found that there looks like what somebody did is they had the Nile River and they diverted the Nile. So they created kind of an offshoot from the Nile. They dug out an area so they could actually collect water. And in addition to that they had built a bunch of grain stores. And our suspicion is that it's as a result of Joseph that they're able to store up food and water, and that he actually directs these things. So not only does Joseph interpret these dreams, but God also gives him the wisdom of set aside this amount of food and do these sorts of things. So practical sort of ways of taking care of the people of Egypt. Later on, you'll find other archaeological things that point to Joseph. One of the interesting finds is they found a statue. They found a statue of a guy in a house that has 12 pillars, which is abnormal for anybody who's, well, it wasn't this style. It's not made in this style. It's made in the Hebrew style, and it's got 12 pillars, and they suspect the 12 pillars represent the 12 brothers, and the statue is in the tomb, and they're able to collect kind of paint fragments and stuff. They're somehow able to figure out how the statue was painted, and I guess the statue had like bright red hair and a colorful cloak. So bright red hair would not be traditional for the Egyptians, not depictions of any Egyptians, but it would be appropriate for a depiction of, for whatever reason, for wherever Joseph is from. So there's a lot of interesting archaeological evidence that indicates that they think they know where Joseph's house was, the 12-pillared house. They think they know where Joseph's tomb was in Egypt. It's a small pyramid, but it's on the property. It's not like the full Giza pyramids, but it's a smaller pyramid, but it's on the same property, so they think that that's where he was buried. So there seem to be indications, archaeological indications, that Joseph's work in Egypt, God's work in Egypt through Joseph, had a significant impact. Again, it's really complicated. It's so far back in time that we really have to take and put together a lot of like little teeny broken pieces and fragments of history and try to say, okay, how exactly do they fit together? What pieces are we missing? So that's why there's a lot of disagreement about what's going on there. Anyways, there's stuff that indicates that this is actually a true story and this isn't just a fairy tale. All right, are there any questions before I keep going? All right, so this is how Egypt had enough food. This is how Egypt got much more wealthy than it already did. I imagine Pharaoh is probably pretty happy with Joseph at this point, not just because he saved Egypt from the famine, not just because obviously God is with him because he was able to interpret these dreams correctly, but also because under his leadership, under Joseph's leadership, all of Egypt prospered. Just like the prison, just like Potiphar's house, everywhere that Joseph was put to work, God was with him. Therefore, he was blessed and it prospered. All right, so all of that is happening in Egypt right now, and you're going to hear how the Israelites got into Egypt in the first place. Because again, later on, you're going to have the Israelites come out of the land of Egypt. But this is why they go to the land of Egypt. It's because of this famine. All right, chapter 42, Genesis chapter 42. When Jacob learned that there was grain for sale in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you look at one another?" And he said, "Behold, I have heard that there is grain for sale in Egypt. Go down there and buy grain for us, that we may live and not die." So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with his brothers, for he feared that harm might happen to him. Thus the sons of Israel came to buy among the others who came, for famine was in the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was governor over the land. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land, and Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them. Does this sound familiar, bowing down before Joseph? It's almost like he predicted this. Well, not predicted. He prophesied that this would happen. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them. But he treated them like strangers and spoke roughly to them. He's just messing with them. "Where do you come from?" he said. And they said, "From the land of Canaan to buy food." And Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. And Joseph remembered the dreams that he had dreamed of them, and he said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of this land." They said to him, "No, my lord. Your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants have never been spies." He said to them, "No, it is the nakedness of this land you have come to see." And they said, "We, your servants, are 12 brothers, the son of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is no more." Interesting. I wonder what happened to him. But Joseph said to them, "It is as I say to you, you are spies." He just keeps repeating this. And imagine these guys, one, they have nowhere else to get food from. They're starving. This is the only one who can ever feed them. And then two, this guy is pretty much Pharaoh. And he's saying things, there's a long history of flippant kings in history. And if you upset the king, you get put to death. And this is definitely a reason to tremble. If he genuinely believes these people are spies, they have every reason to believe that he's soon going to put them to death. So he's making them shiver and shake. Verse 15, "By this you shall be tested. By the life of Pharaoh, you shall not go from this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you and let him bring your brother while you remain confined, that your words may be tested, whether there is truth in you. Or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are all spies." And he put them all together in custody for 3 days. On the third day, Joseph said to them, "Do this and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers remain confined where you are in custody. Let the rest go and carry grain to for your famine in your household. And bring your youngest brother to me." So it's interesting that he changes his mind about this. First, he says that all of them are going to be in prison except for one. And then he says that only one of them has to stay in prison and the rest of them can go back. So he relents of that. "Bring your youngest brother to me," he says. Verse 20. "So your words will be verified and you shall not die." And they did so. Then they said to one another, "In truth, we are guilty concerning our brother in that we in that we saw the distress of his soul. When he begged us, we did not listen. That is why this distress has come upon us." So they don't know that this is Joseph, but they're starting to feel the guilt. And they know that God carries out justice, and they figure that this is the time when God is going to reward them for the evil that they did. Interestingly enough, that's not how God works, and they're going to find that out soon. And Reuben answered him, did I not tell you not to sin against the boy, but you did not listen, so now there must come a reckoning for his blood. They did not know that Joseph understood them, for there was an interpreter between them. So they're speaking Hebrew to one another. Joseph has been in Egypt for years. Joseph is speaking Egyptian to them. Or Joseph is speaking Egyptian to an interpreter is speaking to them. So again, he's pretending like he doesn't know what they're saying. And he hears every word. He understands the entire situation. Verse 24, then he turned away from them and wept. Then he returned to them and spoke to them. And he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. And Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain and replace every man's money in his sack and give them provisions for the journey. This was done for them. Then they loaded their donkeys with grain and departed. And as one of them opened his sack to give his donkey fodder at the lodging place, he saw his money in the mouth of the sack. He said to his brothers, my money has been put back in here. It is in the mouth of my sack. And their hearts failed them. They turned trembling to one another, saying, what is this that God has done to us? So he's literally putting the fear of God into these guys. When they came to Jacob, their father, in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened, saying, the Lord of the land, spoke roughly to us and took us to be spies for the land. But we said to him, we are honest men. We have never been spies. We are 12 brothers, the sons of our father. One is no more, and the youngest is this day with the father in the land of Canaan. Then the Lord of the land said to us, by this I shall know you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers with me. Take grain for the famine of your households, and go on your way. Bring your youngest brother to me. Then I shall know that you are not spies, but honest men. I will deliver your brother to you, and you shall trade in the land. And they emptied their sacks. Behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when their fathers saw their bundles of money, they were afraid. But Jacob, their father, said to them, you have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more, and now you would take Benjamin? All this has come against me. Then Reuben said to his father, kill my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my hands, and I will bring him back to you. But he said, my sons shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is the only one left. So again, the only one left, he's got these 10 other sons, but this is Benjamin and Joseph with the 2 daughters of Rachel, the wife that he loved, as opposed to the 3 wives he didn't treat well. If harm should happen to him on the journey that you are to make, you would bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to Sheol. All right, I think I can get through this. Now the famine was severe in the land, and when they had eaten the grain that they had brought from Egypt, their father said to them, go ahead and buy us a little food. But Judah said to him, the man solemnly warned us, saying, you shall not see my face again unless your brother is with you. If you send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. But if you will not send him, you will not go down. For the man said to us, you shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. It's kind of messed up that the entire time they left Simeon, I think it was, they left him in prison in Egypt. They're like, well, I guess we could just survive on the food. He'll probably be fine. But I guess the alternative is they bring Benjamin with them, and they don't want anything to happen to him. Israel said, why do you treat me so bad? So again, Israel is Jacob, Jacob is Israel. Israel said, why do you treat me so badly? I said, tell the man that you had another brother. So he's mad that they told the truth. They said, how dare you? You told them that Benjamin exists? They replied, the man questioned us carefully about ourselves and our kindred, saying, is your father still alive? Do you have another brother? What we told him was an answer to these questions. Could we in any way know that he would say, bring your brother down? And Judah said to Israel, his father, send the boy with me, and I will arise, and we'll go that we may live and not die, both me and you and our little ones. I will be a pledge of safety. For from my hand you shall require him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. If we had not delayed, we would now have returned twice. And their father Israel said to them, if it must be so, then do this. Take some of the choice fruits of the land in your bag. Carry a present down to the man. A little balm, a little honey, gum, myrrh, pistachio nuts, and almonds. Take double the money with you. Carry back with you the money that was returned in the mouth of your sacks. Perhaps it was an oversight. Take also your brother. Arise, go again to the man. May God Almighty grant you mercy before the man. May he send you back to the other brother and send back. They're going to name him. Send back your other brother and Benjamin. And as for me, if I am bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. So the men took this present, and they took the double the money with them. And Benjamin, they arose and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward of the house, bring the men into the house, slaughter an animal, and make ready for the men to dine with me at noon. The man did as Joseph told him and brought the men to Joseph's house. The men were afraid because they were brought to Joseph's house, and they said, It is because of the money which was replaced in our sacks, the first time we brought it in, so that he may assault us and fall upon us and make us servants and seize our donkeys. So they went up to the steward of Joseph's house and spoke with him at the door of the house. And he said, "Oh, my lord, we came down the first time to buy food. And when we came to the lodging place, we opened our sacks, and there was each man's money in it. In the mouth of the sack, our money was in full weight. So we have brought it again with us, and we have brought other money down to buy food. We do not know who put the money in our sacks." He replied, "Peace to you. Do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your father has put treasure in your sacks for you. I received your money." Then he brought Simeon out to them, and when the men had brought the men into Joseph's house and given them water, and they had washed their feet, when they had given their donkeys fodder, they prepared the present for Joseph's coming at noon, for they heard that they should eat bread there. Verse 26. When Joseph came home and brought into the house to them the present that they had with them, and bowed down to him to the ground, and he inquired about their welfare and said, "Is your father well, the old man of whom you spoke? Is he still alive?" They said, "Your servant, our father, is well. He is alive." They bowed their heads and prostrated themselves. And he lifted up his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son. And he said, "Is this your youngest brother of whom you spoke to me? God be gracious to you, my son." Then Joseph hurried out, for his compassion grew warm for his brothers, and he sought a place to weep. For he entered the chamber, and wept there. Then he washed his face and came out. And controlling himself, he said, "Serve the food." So he's not cold, he's not callous. He has every reason to be angry with his brothers. He's compassionate. But still he's messing with them. I don't know any other way to put it, that he's almost kind of playing a trick on them. They served him by himself, and then by themselves. And the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat with the Hebrews, for that was an abomination to the Egyptians. And they sat before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, the youngest according to his youth. And the men looked one to another in amazement. Portions were taken from Joseph's table, but Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as any of theirs. And they drank and were merry with him. All right, and I'm going to have to end it there. Next chapter is chapter 44. But Joseph, yeah, it's definitely interesting. His brothers fully expect God's wrath and judgment, and instead God meets his brothers with mercy and love and compassion. And they're fully expecting, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, that sort of thing, that God is going to mete out his justice on them, and God is going to give his vengeance, pour out his vengeance on Joseph's brothers. But that's not how God works, and this story is kind of explaining that. So let's do chapter 44 next week and close with the doxology.